Hello, Professor Costello. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview with me. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you.
All right, we're gonna start off with the first question. How did you first start exploring your spiritual side or start your spiritual journey?
I've always been very tuned in. So, since I was a little girl, I asked very deep reflective questions about things that would be considered of a spiritual nature. And I did that before anybody told me what to believe, or here's what's real, or here's what you shouldn't think. And so it's really been a natural part of me, I think. And the journey has just gone from there and developed and deepened and taken sidetracks. So I think it's always been a part of me.
When do you think you first started becoming aware that this was just your nature?
At From the start.
Very start.
From the start.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. And I never thought of it as something that could be fit into a box, or that, oh, you're a spiritual person, because it just felt like such a natural way of moving through the world, to be connected to things larger than myself, to be connected to nature, connected to things that weren't human, things that we couldn't see, energies that we couldn't see. So I didn't even think of it as spiritual. That word, I wouldn't have thought to call it such. I did go to Catholic school when I was older. I was sent to Catholic school, and so then I learned about that. And then as I was exposed to more and more world religions, I learned about different systems of belief. But from the start, I was just what I was. And now looking back, I could say, okay, people would call that really spiritual.
Sounds so wonderful. I love that. Okay. When and why did you decide to help others with growing their soul?
With growing their soul, which is, of course, a reference to
Yes.
the website. I was naturally helping people around the time I started. I'm going to say maybe 2008 or 9. And I found myself in different forms of relationships, not romantic relationships, just in relationship with people where we weren't friends. I wasn't receiving payment, but I was helping them through something in their life that maybe they couldn't access answers to on their own. And I started wondering, what am I doing? This is something, is this counseling? Is this life coaching? Is this some kind of a spiritual guidance? And so it took several years after that for me to refine that what I was doing was ultimately, or what I would call it is helping people get in touch with their own highest guidance and make decisions in their life and create a life from that place of higher guidance, so that we're not just making decisions based on what we think we should do, or what's going to make us money, or fear-based decisions. And so, I mean, it's really just a little part of it, but I suppose it was an evolution over many years of helping people come to know themselves better and make decisions that were more aligned with who they really were.
Can you remember an instance where you first started to realize this was kind of what you were doing? And can you remember a specific story or something that really touched you?
Sure. There was someone who asked me, I guess I'd helped him a lot become more in tune with his emotions, his feeling side. And this wasn't someone I was dating, it was just a person. I cared about this person, but I guess, and this was all in hindsight when he was telling me how I'd helped him to access parts of himself he wasn't usually able to access. And he asked me, he was starting up a bunch of businesses in Chicago, and he said, will you come out here and help me like bless these places as I'm getting this up and going? And I think he wanted me, I don't know if this is exactly the best story, I don't know if this is what you were looking for, but I thought, wow, he wants me to come help bless these places. And I never thought about something like that, like me, like what, he wants me to come bless his new business spaces before he builds his business there. And I thought, well, of course I will. And by the way, this is not at all what I do within that, the Growing with Soul spiritual counseling. This is just the instance you asked for when I realized that there were people that were looking to me for something that they believed I had to offer. And I thought, okay, maybe I can help offer the confidence that this person needs, whether it's through a blessing or talking to him about how these things are going to thrive. And you know, I went to Chicago and saw all these spaces that he was going to be using to build his restaurants. He's actually someone who went to the restaurant and hotel management school out here. So I knew him. I was in graduate school here at UNLV. And so I went there, and I think he needed he needed something to get going, to really believe that he'd risked all of himself for these enterprises. And I feel like, you know, he needed some more belief maybe in himself that this was going to thrive. And I don't know if that's a good example. I feel now like that's not the best example, but that was one example where I realized that someone's looking to me for something, and I didn't realize I had it to offer until maybe that moment.
I'm gonna take a little pause.
Yeah.
Check that it's still recording. Yes.
Okay.
Well, I just have to make sure. You never know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that what you were looking for, or should I give a different story?
No, I think that sounds.
That's
great.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to tie into future questions. Okay. The third question asks, in our thesis, we explore the different pathways to establishing a spiritual connection. Which is your preferred method of accessing higher states of consciousness?
Gosh. Well.
If any.
Well, there's many. I've explored so many different paths. And one of the analogies I use for people that are on this path of seeking answers or truths or revelations about the laws of nature themselves is that it's like this big, beautiful mountain, like this cosmic mountain. And there's many paths up this mountain. And we're not all necessarily taking the same path. Some people, I feel like, don't even acknowledge this mountain is there. They don't want to climb it, or they're like, I'm not on that journey. I don't care why things are the way they are. I don't need to look inside myself. But for people who acknowledge they're on that journey, I think there's so many ways up the mountain. So I've tried many different forms of yoga from different Eastern and Western traditions. I studied Sufism for a while, which is like it's a very mystical tradition that comes out of like the Middle East, in part. I practice different forms of yoga, like Kundalini, Hatha, Ashtanga, all sorts of different forms of yoga. Through traveling, I think being in nature and traveling can be intensely spiritual. The exposure to different forms of life and ways of life, and the way that can open you up to think differently about things. I think my favorite has to be, I came upon a different, for instance, I've been going down to Brazil, and to South America in general. I've been to Peru, Bolivia, and Brazil, and some others. And I came in contact with some indigenous cultures, like the Yawanawa, the Huni Queen, and they have different ceremonies and sacred ways of celebrating the earth that really resonate with me. And so that's been, I would say, in the last 6 years or 7 years of my life, that's the path I'm on. I'm singing the songs that they sing. They have different healing songs. I'm sitting in ceremony in South America, and also up here with a group that works in that tradition. And so that's been my way of accessing those higher states of consciousness recently.
I remember you mentioned them during the class, and I was very, I think I could see it, like there was a glimmer in everyone's eye, like, because it was so interesting. I had never heard anything like that before.
Yeah.
Like, coming into contact with indigenous tribes that were really, I guess, hidden in the rainforest.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It sounds so mystical.
It is.
It's
very mystical.
I was glad you told us that story, because it really got me thinking about what people could do, or what people want as spiritual paths.
Yeah, and there's a lot more to say about that, but for the appropriateness of the interview and the brevity I won't, but there's so much to say about the work that that groups like that do that I think should be more widespread, or we should be embracing that type of work more in the West or up here in North America or all over the place. But that's another conversation.
What common traits do individuals have who are looking for spiritual counseling or looking for a pathway to obtaining spiritual comfort?
That's a really good question. I think the people I talk to, I feel really blessed because anybody who I'm helping through something is already in a pretty good place. I'm not a therapist. I don't have an MFT. My degrees aren't in any kind of traditional counseling or helping people with psychological disorders. And I'm sure those are all very beautiful people just in dark spaces, but the kind of people that might seek guidance from me usually have their lives and their mental states relatively pretty together. Like
Okay.
they're gonna look like people who are, hey, that person looks like they're in a great spot in their life. But they tend to be people who know they can go deeper and they know there's something more out there for them, or they're living a life that looks good on the inside, but it doesn't really feel aligned with what they're meant to be doing here in
So
this
they have
lifetime.
they have a certain drive?
There is a certain drive, and the drive is beyond just an ambition of this is the kind of house I need or this is the kind of job I need. They may also have those drives, but it's this deeper pulling that it comes from a place that knows all of that stuff is really just survival stuff in the material world, and there's something else more essential why they're here, and they want to make sure they're living their life answering that calling, and they want to get in touch with that. Some people can't make the distinction between what is their mind telling them to do and what is their soul or their spirit or God or whatever terminology you want to use, what is that telling them to do? And so they want help making the differentiation between the mind, like we talked about in class, the SEM mind versus the Rigpa mind. So I help people with meditation techniques or things to do in their daily lives when a crazy emotion comes up or when anxiety comes up. How can they face that and get to the bottom of it and heal it and live a more mindful life and make better decisions. So much of this is about making decisions that are coming from a place of alignment, so that you don't wake up one day and look at your life and say, how did I get here? If you're making really decisions that are coming from a place of who you really are and what you really need, all these little decisions along the way add up to this big beautiful life that is perfect for you.
I'm glad that you mentioned they're looking for something more than survival, because that's one of our main points in the thesis. We mentioned Abraham Maslow's five hierarchies of need, and the bottom one, essentially the foundation, is survival. So biological things like food, shelter, clothing, that type of stuff. So I just find it really interesting because it matches with Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah, that's a great connection. And I think a lot of us, we have a tendency to, in moments of fear, go down to that basic level. Like, well, how am I going to pay my bills? Or how am I going to be safe? And that's okay. We do need to care about those things. However, not at the expense of those other things that are higher up the hierarchy. You don't want to compromise your autonomy and your soul, your self-actualization. You don't want to compromise that just to make sure that those physical needs are met. And that might sound like a luxury to someone who's struggling, and they'll say, yeah, it's easy for you to say that. Well, no, I've been there. I've been in all the places. And I think that's actually a quality I admire in people is when they've gone through their own dark nights of the soul and they've had to make their way through these struggles. In my opinion, how can someone really help guide someone else through the darkness if they haven't been in the darkness without a candle themselves? So I understand. I do.
It's a great analogy. Thank you for that response. That was really wonderful. All right. The fifth question asks, do you think that spirituality is something that can fulfill an individual?
I do. In my world, it is one of, if not the most fulfilling elements of my life. The times when I've felt, and this is what's gone through my system, this is how it's supposed to be. this is life, this is what it means to be alive, those are very spiritual or mystical moments for me. You know, I'm not reading a book when that happens. I'm not, no offense, UNLV, but I'm usually not sitting at this desk when that happens. I'm not, I'm not at a bar or a club or something. It's usually when I'm having a connection, and it's not to say you can't find blissful spiritual moments in any of those situations. You can. It's all spiritual. However, I think perhaps love, human love, and the nurturing of the soul are the, I think, that the two most fulfilling, to use the word you brought up, aspects of being alive. And what that soul fulfillment looks like, I mean, I could give you concrete examples if you wanted, but there's a lot of different things that I would call examples of that.
And I have a question that kind of connects to the fifth question we just asked. Do you believe that something like materialism or being caught up in the foundational survival stage of Maslow's hierarchy, do you think that can kind of cloud or create a veil for someone so that they don't even have the capacity to think spirituality can fulfill them, or they just refuse?
Completely. I think that happens all the time. All the time. I think sometimes we can't see past this one immediate challenge or fear in front of us. And if we could get to that, if we could feel into or be mindful of some of the, how do I phrase this? I don't know. You can edit this one out. Yeah, I guess the short answer to your question is just yes. I think that happens all the time. I think that blocks us often.
The next question is, have you noticed that once a client is involved in their spirituality, their satisfaction with life increases?
Yes, and I'll say this, the big picture overall, everything, the satisfaction with that increases. There may be parts that temporarily become difficult or need to fall away. For instance, this is a very common example. Someone might be in a relationship that is not serving them. They're not serving it any longer. The relationship was maybe based on who you were 5-10 years ago, who this other person was 5-10 years ago. You're no longer aligned. It's past its expiration date, and you're clinging. Going back to that other question you just asked, maybe you're clinging because you're afraid of being, how do I take care of myself? How do I pay my bills without this person? Or who's going to fulfill me emotionally? Or no one will love me? Or there's self-esteem issues, or whatever it is. You're not hanging on for the right reasons. There are those lower level fears on that hierarchy you're talking about. So people, I forget what the question was.
Oh, it's all good.
Forget. No, what was it? Because I was going somewhere.
Have you noticed that once a client is involved in their spirituality, their satisfaction with life increases?
Right. Okay. So someone might come to the realization that this relationship needs to be over.
Yeah.
This relationship's done, and so there's a discomfort and a pain in the ending of that, and it's sad and it's difficult. So their overall life satisfaction might not feel great right away, but then there's this thing inside that people talk about. I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, not supposed to coming from outside. I know what I'm doing because I'm in tune with what my soul needs me to do right now. And so that overrides the temporary discomfort of what might need to be changed in someone's life in order for them to ultimately get past all of it and feel really at peace and free.
Okay, I see what you mean. So you're saying like that temporary discomfort might feel really bad and you might want to cling on, but when you go in the future and look at it in retrospect, you'll see that you can actually admit to yourself that your overall life has become, I guess, more fulfilling or more whole.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. More fulfilling and more whole. Yeah.
All right. Our next question is, what are some day-to-day benefits your clients experience once they are involved with spirituality?
The first one that I keep thinking of is peace, the feeling of inner peace, so that no matter what comes at you, there's this internal equilibrium all the time. So someone might say something nasty to you at school or work, or you have a fight with your friend, or something with your family pops up, and maybe the past you would have had a lot of anxiety about it, or would have dwelled on it, or would have been like, how are people like this? I can't believe this is the world. They get angry. I used to get angry at ignorance a lot. It would really upset me, and at one point I had to ask myself, do you want to be angry the rest of your life or not? And I said, well, no, I don't want to be angry the rest of my life. So I had to let things go, and I had a mantra. When I looked at someone or a situation where they were behaving in a way that was really unempathetic or just cruel or ignorant in some fashion, I wouldn't judge it. I would just say, I am you sometimes. I am you sometimes, and remind myself that there's someone out there being patient with me too. So I think I forgot the question again. I just talked. I'm just staring at the trees, forgetting the questions.
No, it's what are some day-to-day benefits your clients experience when they're involved?
The peace, yes. So there's the peace now. So instead of things that might have hit you and felt like a wrecking ball hitting you.
Perfect timing.
Good sound effect.
Yeah.
Things just feel like little flies, tiny little specks of dust. So the peace, the freedom, I think, when we're no longer, when we realize we're no longer attached, and we realize everything really is possible, and we've let go of the unhealthy attachments we might have to things or people or belief systems. It's liberating. It's because you have this inner power in knowing that no matter what is taken away from me, no matter what passes on through my life and is no longer a part of my life, that impermanence thing we talk about in class, I'm going to be great. I can build anything I want to build. I can be anyone I want to be. I'm going to be fine. That's empowering. So it brings you freedom. It brings you peace. I think we start to feel a different kind of love. Like there's the romantic love, the kind of like, well, I love you as long as you're this for me. Like as long as we are partners or husband and wife or whatever it is, wife and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, all the combinations that we can be, right? As long as you're this, I love you. And I personally, I don't think that's a spiritual love. I think a more spiritual cosmic love is just flowing through you. Like you're this vessel for this love, and you may be with somebody in a relationship or not, but that love is there. It doesn't matter if one day they're called this to you or they're called that to you. It's not contingent upon anything. So I think with more spiritual development or a more spiritual outlook of life, I think we tend to love more and more purely and not freely, like I'm going out there loving everybody in like the 60s, although that's cool if you want to do that, but I just mean it doesn't have these little hooks in it. Like I'm gonna love you as long as this, I'm gonna love you as long as that, and you're gonna do this for me.
There's no but attached to that. I forgot what I was gonna say.
Yeah, well, that's probably my energy rubbing off on you. Because I'm forgetting everything today. There's no but.
Well, we're gonna take a little break again. Just to make sure.
Oh my God.